So the spirit of this video is just as it says, alpha testing resumes. As of today, October 20th, alpha testing is back. And I'm so excited and so confused, to be honest, because I thought it was coming in November is what people were talking about for the next preview. But when I did a little bit more digging and diving into what this really is, this isn't a preview. This is a closed alpha that is not for everyone. You can sign up for this event. You can go to this website that's up here to read this information for yourself and apply to potentially be an alpha tester in the future. But a little bit, taking a step back, what is this game? To the people who are brand new. New World is Amazon's new MMO that's going to be coming out. It was supposed to be released basically by now, but they've pushed it back to spring. A lot of us are happy about it. Me personally, I'm very happy about it. I've always been a proponent of push things back, get it done right, and Amazon's the kind of company where they can afford to do so, and that's one of the things that has really drawn me to this game, the fact that it is an Amazon game. I know they have had some slip-ups in the past, but in my opinion, what the product is that Amazon puts out, because Amazon, yes, they have many products that they sell, but what their product really is they find out what is it that consumers want and how do we give that to them. So I'm hoping they can do that with a game. I'm hoping they can do that with an MMO, and I'm hoping that that happens with New World. Now, reading through this alpha testing little piece of information, I've decided that they are on that path. You know, we've seen what New World is, and there's a lot of things that are missing from the game, which, if they were releasing it now, would be a problem. But it's still in its alpha stages. It's still a developing game. It's still growing. They're still adding features, functionality, gameplay, and lots of different things into the game, as you'll see when I read through here some of the new stuff that they've added since the most recent preview. I'm going to go into how these changes sort of affect the game itself and what it means for the future and why I'm excited. So I'm just going to read through this just to give you an idea. Essentially, they've equipped with a ton of data and feedback from preview. We are back in development and heading forward into alpha testing. Like previous alpha test phases, this phase will be confidential, and we, as we implement changes, experiment with design ideas, and break things in the pursuit of making them much better. And this is great. A lot of times people who are testers get very upset by these things that break. People who are a little bit more alpha-minded, who have done these things in the past, understand that when you're changing things, things can break, and it's not about that experience. It's about making progress in the game. So a lot of stuff is going to go back and forth. But even though it's confidential, what they are going to be doing along the way, skipping some of this other stuff, except for this is very important here. If you want to sign up to be a tester, you go to this website and you click on this tester sign up page link to be able to go into there. But one of the things, in the spirit of transparency, they are committing to publicly sharing a version of our alpha release notes moving forward. These notes will highlight the newest changes and content coming to New World. This is the first of many updates that will come to the game during alpha. So even though we won't be able to see what's happening in alpha because it is confidential, they will be giving us information on changes that are happening along the way. And again, Amazon knows what they're doing. They're keeping people excited by seeing how the game is developing as it comes closer to its expected release date next spring. But we're going to see what actually happens. So what are some of those changes? Let's start with combat. Now, there's certain weapons that you can choose in the game, and it's a little bit different than other games. You don't have classes, you have weapon types, and the weapon that you're using determines your class at that specific time, determines your abilities. It's all based off of the type of weapon in your hand, and each weapon has its own skill tree. So they've added a brand new weapon, so they're expanding the different styles that you can play the game as. So they added Spear, which is a new melee weapon offering both long distance pierce and some range capabilities, as you would expect with a spear, which is fantastic. That's one of the things that you'll find throughout this game, that a lot of times the combat just makes sense. A spear, it's going to be a long damage pierce weapon with some range capabilities, and they allow you to do all those different things. And there's going to be two different skill trees like all the other weapons have. Also tells you that it's going to be based primarily off of dexterity, with small benefits from strength. So kind of like the opposite of what you're seeing with the hatchet. The hatchet will get higher strength, but also scales off dexterity. This is the opposite, which you would expect to see from a spear. Makes sense. So there's a zoner skill tree, which specializes in keeping enemies at a distance, which also gives you some throwing spears options as well from range. So keeping them at a distance, a zoning skill tree. Would be a lot of fun to play. Or an impaler skill tree, specializes in closing the gap and quicker attacks that impart status effects, which could be maybe a damage over time bleed effect from an impaler, or it might slow the enemy down, some sort of status effect. I don't know if it's going to add debuffs or things like that. It would be interesting to have a debuffer. If you play games that I've played like EverQuest, that sounds kind of like a brigand almost, if that's the case. It's still a little vague, but there's a lot of different things that can still go into the game, and as you can see, it's still developing. Now here's something that a lot of people were talking about: per weapon cooldowns. As it was in the game previous to what it is now, when you use an ability from one weapon and then swapped over to another, because at any time you can have 3 different weapons equipped and you can swap between them depending on what you want to do in the middle of a fight, and then you can use different abilities from each weapon. Now it used to be that when you used an ability in one weapon and swapped over, the ability that was in that same button, that same action slot, would keep the cooldown from the previous ability that you just used from a different weapon. Now they're changing that. Each weapon that you have will have independent cooldowns. Each weapon will now have independent cooldowns, meaning you can use all 3 abilities on your hatchet and then switch to your Warhammer and use all 3 of its abilities. Now this is the way that a lot of people thought the game was going to be. And the interesting thing here is it allows you to really think of different rotations that you can do by having different weapon types to be able to combo lots of different things. You know, kind of trying to figure out where should I be using all of these different abilities to min-max to do more. And it's when you have the ability to do those types of things that make you stand out against other people, adds more skill potential into the game. But it does take away some of the feeling that was in the game before, where you had to really be careful about what abilities you were using. So it's going to greatly change the feel of the game. The next time that people who've played previously get to play again, it's going to feel completely different just because of this reason. And this actually adds a lot of skill potential into the game as well, which is fantastic for these types of games. So this is a great change, in my opinion. It does make it feel different, but I think it's a good feel different. And on top of that, weapon switching is going to be sped up, which is great. There were so many times before when I was swapping between weapons for different things, maybe because I would be a bow user, but I'd also use a hatchet when things would get close to me. And it wasn't as smooth before, and that was something that I had trouble with. So this I'm incredibly excited about. These two things together completely change the game, and it's going to be a lot of fun to play. It's going to be a lot of fun to play. Also, you can now dodge roll without stamina after being struck in multiple consecutive reactions. So trying to give people an ability to get out of situations. A lot of players were complaining that they were feeling like they were getting stuck in situations. When they were in combat, they felt like they couldn't do anything. This is going to give you the ability to roll out of that stun lock, that chain lock from being hit with multiple different attacks. And abilities that are interrupted or canceled before the active frames of the attack will no longer be on cooldown. Sometimes you were using things and it was interrupted or canceled, but it still went on cooldown. And that was a nuisance. So I'm glad they fixed that. Now they're doing a little bit of balance. The vast majority of people who were playing the game in the preview events and the alphas, most people were using the hatchet. Reason being is the hatchet had a number of different abilities that made it powerful. Number one, Berserk. It had a Berserk ability, and I believe it was a 12-second duration before. It may have been 15. Don't remember offhand because I'm not looking at it. But while you were Berserk, you were immune to death. So long as you went far enough down the tree, you'd be immune to death on top of the bonuses that Berserk would give you in terms of damage output. So you had a long death immunity. It is now 10 seconds, which is still substantial. Berserking Endurance. Every time you kill an enemy target while in Berserk, you'd have to get the killing blow, I believe. While in Berserk, it would increase the duration by 3 seconds. That's now a 2-second increase. So it used to be that you'd go Berserk, you'd kill a bunch of things, you'd rack up all this extra duration, and you're death immune for a long period of time as you constantly kill new targets. Call of the Week changed to a heavy attack. Don't have a lot to say about that. Rejuvenating Kills. Every time you kill a target in the Hatchet, you would get I think it was a 10% or even a 20% health boost. So it was a massive heal. I think it was a 20% health boost. It may have been 10 though, but it's reduced to 5. So it's at least a cut in half. It could be 1/4 the strength. I forget what it was before, but you're only going to heal 5%, which is nowhere near what it was before. So they're really trying to make Hatchet so that the things that made it overpowered, it's a little bit more balanced. Relentless Fury, that was on consecutive attacks. It would increase the damage of your light attacks. It's reduced to 5% increase per attack. I believe it was 10% before. And then reduced homing on second and third light attacks. The light staff, everyone used this for travel. Everyone had a light staff. Now, they didn't always use the light staff. The light staff, by the way, is your healing item. If you want to be a healer in this game, you wear a light staff, and then you can heal people. You can also do some other interesting things. One of the abilities that the light staff had was, it says speed of light. I think it was called Dart. It was called Dart in the game. Decreased speed of light distance. They may have changed Dart to speed of light. I don't know. Decreased speed of light distance to by 50%. So you go half the distance, and the cooldown is increased. People were using this for fast travel. Every single person had this. Not everyone. I'm sure some people made the mistakes of not having it, but most people did so that they could easily get around the map quickly. And then this is a really fun one for people who wanted to be healers. Before, if you healed someone during a fight, you didn't get any weapon experience for any target that you were killing because you didn't do any damage to the target. Because the way it works in New World is you're leveling your character anytime you get experience from a quest or from killing a mob. But your weapons also will gather experience specifically for that weapon, and that allows you to go down the different weapon trees, the weapon mastery trees, to get more abilities, to get more bonuses to your weapon, to your health, to all kinds of things in those trees. So the mastery experience, you weren't getting mastery experience, so now you can heal targets and you will successfully get mastery experience for your life staff, which is a healing staff. It should happen that way, and it's a good thing that they did this. Those little changes that little things that didn't feel so good in the game, they're changing those things, they're fixing those things. It's getting better, and I like to see these changes happen. Backstab adjustments. Any melee attack that hits an enemy's back, now they have some typos here, but that's okay. Any melee attack that hits an enemy's back now gets backstab damage bonus, which is a 1.3 times, so a 30% damage increase to a weapon's damage if you are behind the target. So you get backstab damage. So behind the target, an extra 30% increase. But also, in New World, you have to know that mobs will actively block, and when you're behind, they can't block. So not only are you going to be doing damage more often by them not blocking, but you're also going to get this 30% damage increase. And this is going to be tuned for different weapon types in the future. So I love that they put this in here because melee weapons all have a standard increased damage from being behind, which is great. Tactically, that makes a lot of sense for MMOs in general. Mob positioning to give your teammates the backside to be able to do more damage is common tactics. So when they're adding these sorts of things in, my brain just goes, good, this makes sense. This is MMO related. We're getting closer. We're getting closer to what we're used to seeing, the things that we want to see New World have. So, and the fact that it says it's going to be tuned for different weapon types, brilliant. I've played other games like EverQuest where certain classes will have different multipliers based off of their class. In New World, weapons are your classes. So it makes sense. I like it. And backstabs no longer cause knockdowns, which is fine. World experience, just your experience in the world. Housing will now display a couple of different things. This is great. There are some benefits to housing for sure. Trophies and things like that. If you're interested in the game or if you play the game, look into trophies. You're going to want to have them. AI. This is the second part of this whole thing that I'm very excited about. There's a new threat system. If you're not familiar with MMO speak, threat or aggro is there's a mob, a skeleton, whatever it may be. Who is it going to run after? Who is it going to be aggroed on? Who is it going to try to hit? And who needs to, how do you decide who this thing is hitting? In the game before, I was relatively certain that it was proximity based. If you were standing next to the target, it was hitting you. If I would step away and there was somebody else next to the target, it would turn and hit that person. So when I was trying to tank targets or move them around or pull something off someone, it didn't have that MMO feel to it. But now we're going to have a new threat system. They're introducing a new threat system where a single threat value is calculated per player. Great. Higher threat greatly increases the chance to be selected as the enemy's target. Great. Makes sense. Created logic for how threat is calculated. Currently, damage and threat perks are the main determined, but expect specific attacks to add and remove threat in the future. Great. These are the kind of things that we see in other games. You have tank characters who have taunt abilities, which say, hey, you over there, I'm going to increase my threat on this target because I want it to focus on me. My attributes are increasing my health. I have big, heavy armor. I want my mages who are weak not to have to deal with anything targeting them. And that's what makes MMOs interesting. When you have these abilities to have specialized characters who are very good at certain tasks, and then you group them together to be stronger as a whole. So the fact that there's a new threat system coming in, I love that. Now it's going to make it very volatile at the same time, because it used to be that you can control aggro very easily based on proximity, based on where you're standing, based on who's simply deciding to tank. But it's going to make it slightly less volatile in when you're moving around, trying to avoid damage and dodge and things like that. It's not going to randomly jump off you and go somewhere else if you are able to keep the threat high. But the reason that it's volatile is because now you have a situation where a target is attacking someone who's tanking the target, and then there's an archer who's doing massive damage to that target. That guy's not going to stand there proximity based. He's going to run after that archer who's blowing him up like crazy and want to take him out because he's a squishy. Not because he's a squishy, but because he's done enough threat to be selected as the enemy's target. So, much more MMO based. Economy and progression. There's some progression changes, and I'm a little iffy on this one, but I kind of get where they're coming from. A lot of people were constantly doing corrupted breaches when they got a little higher level. That's like rifts, if you ever played Rift. So people were grinding those. So they've reduced the experience that players get from corrupted breaches, which is sad because I really had a lot of fun playing the corrupted breaches and grinding experience doing them. They also reduced the experience that people get from killing creatures, which is a bit sad. Now, they luckily have reduced the amount of mastery experience required to level up your weapons by 25%. Because there is a reduction experience here, they want your weapons to still level up at the same rate. So they've done this to offset, as you can see, to compensate. They also reduced the delivery missions experience and rewards. They did that during the last preview event, and I have mixed emotions about that. People were taking advantage of the delivery missions in a way, but I do like the concept of a delivery mission giving you more experience than a similar kill quest, right? So let's say you have two quests side by side. You have one that's a kill quest within the zone that you get the quest. So let's say it's going to take you 20 minutes to do, right? So it's going to take you 20 minutes to get to your location, kill a bunch of targets, and then get back. Or they can have you do a delivery quest, which has, theoretically, no killing involved. So you don't have any of that supplemental experience, even though the fact that for some reason they're reducing it. I don't know, maybe they just wanted it to be slower or wanted to force people to do the quests more often. Me personally, I did the quests the whole time and just supplement it with killing creatures, but whatever. But in the delivery missions, there's theoretically no killing that's occurring. So that kill-based experience in most games is converted to additional experience for the delivery itself. But what they did is they made the delivery experience extremely low so that anytime a delivery mission popped up, I just didn't bother taking it unless I was planning on going to that city anyway, and I just grabbed it because I was going there. So I'm going to see what they actually have in terms of experience and rewards on these. I'm hoping that it's done logically, because you need to factor in the concept that there's no additional potential experience involved in this quest task. So the quest itself theoretically needs to be a little bit more valuable. Unless the game is simply trying to allow additional experience and rewards for simply traveling to another town, and then you're just supplementing extra. Basically, you're giving yourself extra experience and rewards when you're naturally traveling. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to grab these delivery missions. But we'll see. When the time comes, we'll see how much it actually gives, and we'll change our opinion at that point. Attribute changes. This needed to happen. One of the things that I was feeling in the game is that there wasn't enough of a sense of progression. And that's fine, again, because we're in alpha, and I've played other betas even where there was no sense of progression, and the gear didn't really feel as rewarding as I felt it should be for a new tier. So they're increasing the amount of attribute points that we get from leveling. They added attribute points to gear. Before, there were no attribute points on the gear except for gem slots. I don't ever... were there actually... No, that's not that game. That was a different game. There's no attribute points on gear before, but now there is, which is good. It's going to give a little bit more variety to gear. It's going to help us be able to choose what is the best for us and be able to have, like I said, more variety. More variety allows you to have more analysis on what is the right thing to do, what's the best thing to do, what are good combinations. And that's part of what makes MMOs great, right? You don't want it to be all pigeonholed into everyone wears these things. You want a little bit of variety. You want to look around and everyone's wearing something different. Oh my gosh, you got that piece from over there, or you got this special item that has these rare stats on it. And that's one of the things about New World when you get these items. If you've ever played games like Diablo, the itemization reminds me of Diablo's itemization, where you get a piece and then there's a random range of values of where the piece is in terms of quality, as well as random actual stats that are specifically on the piece itself. Now they also did a couple of changes here going forward. They adjusted focus. Before, focus was your regeneration and cooldown rate. Now they've changed it, because it used to be that people who were fire staff users, like a mage, would have intelligence and focus. Now they've changed focus to simply be the primary scaler for the life staff, because it used to be that intelligence scaled the life staff's output. No longer does that. Also no longer affects the cooldown rate. Focus. And they're noting their long-term goal is to have focus be the attribute for healers and support classes, while intelligence becomes the attribute for damage dealers / mages. Now the gems that were in the game before, since they added attribute points to gear, the gems no longer give attribute points. Instead, they provide elemental damage for weapons and family banes for armor, which makes sense as well when you look at other games for what gems are. Let's say you have a ruby, a red fire gem, or something like that, to add some sort of elemental damage. So we'll see what those are, and I'm assuming they're going to be fun. Now they added diminishing returns to all attributes, and I want to put a little highlight on this word all, because I don't like it. I don't like this word all. I've played lots of games that have diminishing returns, and diminishing returns have value. No doubt about it, they have value. But I think there are certain attributes that don't need diminishing returns. Typically, your primary stats don't need them. That would be my personal opinion. Your primary stats do not need diminishing returns. Everything else, like your armor, things like that, even hit points, I don't think health needs any diminishing returns. I don't think it's necessary. I think you can just simply decide what you're going to put on the piece and not have it be diminishing in terms of health. In terms of your primary stats, all attributes. Whatever. It's what they want to do. We'll see how it goes. As long as it's balanced and it scales well and it feels right, that's all that matters. But my opinion. Gear and rewards. Gear changes. They adjusted level requirements and rarity mapping for gear. I'm going to leave this, well, whatever. In preparation for a strong endgame gear chase. Now, this made me very excited that they said this. A strong endgame gear chase. Either they listen to me or I'm not the only one that said it. But one of the things that makes an MMO successful, one of the things that makes an MMO very successful, is when they're able to have strong endgame gear chases. That way, there's longevity. There's this sense of wanting to constantly get the next best thing. Now, they adjusted the level requirements and rarity mapping. And rarity mapping, I'll explain in a second. But adjusted level requirements. It used to be that there were only certain level requirements. You could either wear something at level 1. You could wear something at level 20, 35, 45. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't get past that. So, 60, yeah, there was a level 60. So, and that was it. So they've adjusted the level requirements, so gear now has specific level requirements. Previously, all gear was from a tier, as I said, but now it's going to be different. And the level requirement of a piece is going to be based on its great score, which is like gear score from other games. High rarity gear has a lower level requirement than lower rarity gear with the same gear score. Great score, gear score, I don't know what they're trying to say here. Making rarity even more valuable. Rarity mapping changed so that legendary gear can now be crafted. Legendary gear can now be crafted and dropped from the world. So they're just changing how rarity works in terms of dropping and being acquired. And then last, there are some new gear perks. These are attributes that can possibly be on pieces of gear, and they've added 16 new perks to the game. 9 perks that will reduce the weight of specific classes for items, like food or other things. And then there's 7 perks that will affect threat generation now that there is threat in the game. So these are the changes that they have so far. I'll keep you up to date on the changes that are coming in the future, and that's all for now. I hope you learned some things here. I hope you got some good information, and enjoy your time in New World.